Go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. If you do stop by while I'm doing this, and if you do stop while I'm doing this, make sure you're commenting. I'd love to interact with you if you are interested in interacting in this topic. I have found that it is not an easy topic to cover with many people within the conservative constitutional originalist camp, especially within the conservative Republican movement. It is almost a dangerous conversation for me to be having, because a lot of people like to see themselves as exclusively back the blue at all costs. It's kind of like the thing that's going on, which has been going on within patriotic Christendom for a while, which is I stand with Israel always, no matter what. Speaking of which, part 2 of When Allies Attack comes out tomorrow afternoon, or tomorrow evening, so make sure you're tuning in for that. Drinking my Joe this morning and waxing philosophical. Make sure that you are checking out the merchandise. I have coffee available. I have merchandise available. I'm telling you, these things are like very much in keeping with the theme of Black Robe Regiment. I could see this little leather. I don't know. These things are really fancy. So thanks to Second Generation Creations for coming up with these. These are amazing. But tumblers, mugs, coffee. Coffee is made by Indies Coffee, and it is phenomenal. Head over to my Subscribe Star, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. I know that everybody is very tight on their finances right now, so anything you can do to help. There's a $3 entry level. Everything helps, keeps me going, helps pay the internet bill, if you will. So let's get down to it, right? So last week we talked about this and we defined bad cop by talking about knowing what a bad cop looks like. So when you see a cop who's abusing their authority, when you see a cop who's beating people up ruthlessly, the Rodney King being beat up by the LA cops back in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm so old I forgot if it happened at the end of it happened in the 90s. Yeah, there we go. You think back to George Floyd on Memorial Day of 2020. You think to the Breonna Taylor situation. You think of the Philando Castile situation. You think of dozens and dozens. I'm sorry, I'm got somebody trying to message me about the show, and I'm like, it's a little late, bro. You can't come on. But anyway, we know what a bad cop looks like when we see it. We know what a bad cop looks like when, you see civil people out there doing First and Second Amendment audits, and the cop gets mad and tries to have them tries to arrest them or ticket them or handcuff them for shooting video. But what about when a cop is allegedly not one of those? Not, I shouldn't say allegedly, but what when a cop is not one of those people who is blatantly and boldly violating good conduct, but maybe they're just a policy follower, right? Maybe dozens and dozens and dozens of people in law enforcement. They just do their job. They enforce the law, and on and on and on. And they follow, they follow prescribed practices. Their sergeant, their lieutenant, their captain their chief, their sheriff, whatever, gives them an order, and they follow it. They back it up. They just go ahead and do it. They're not, beating up anybody. They're not shooting unarmed civilians. And when I mean unarmed, I don't mean just no gun. I mean somebody who's not carrying a knife, trying to hurt anybody. Someone who's not trying to shoot you. Someone who's not physically assaulting you. So you look at the situation with Ferguson. Good shoot. Very good shoot. Jacob Blake. Good shoot. It's hard to argue with that situation, right? But what about cops who go along with every law that comes down? So let's talk about red flag laws, okay? Now I'm going to go back a couple of years to the red flag laws that have been in place for quite some time. But if we go back to was it 2018, I think it was, a man named Gary Willis was awakened at 5:17 in the morning when two Anne Arundel County police officers showed up at his house with a red flag warrant. Okay? They showed up with a red flag warrant to seize his weapons because a family member said something happened in a family dispute that made them concerned. So without any due process, without any legal representation, without any proof, a judge issued a red flag seizure and sent law enforcement to this man's house to take his firearms. And the ensuing encounter resulted in this man being shot to death by law enforcement. Now, the chief, Timothy Altomare, that at that time, and this there again was, I think it was 2018, I want to say it was, said, and I quote, if you look at this morning's outcome, it's tough for us to say, well, what did we prevent? Because we don't know what we prevented or could have prevented. What would have happened if we didn't go there at 5 a.m.? Now, this is not him saying maybe we should have gone later in the day when he was awake. This is him saying we had to go when we went because he might have done something more drastic than what he already had done. And it's troubling that this is the response to a man being gunned down without due process. Law enforcement shows up to his house. They say, we're here to legally seize your weapons, which was illegal. Red flag laws are illegal. They're unconstitutional and they're unlawful. And there again, there's no due process. You've committed no crime. Someone that you're closely related to or closely associated with feels concerned that you might be dangerous and files an anonymous complaint stating that you are dangerous. And that's all that's needed for them to come and take your guns from you. Now, that person's not going to come take your gun from you. The judge isn't going to come take the gun from you. The social worker, the mental health professional is not going to come take that gun from you. They're going to send men with guns to come to your house and take your guns from you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is that a good cop? Can we say that that's a good cop? And our initial gut reaction is to say, yes, he did his job. He did what he had to do. He's protecting and he's serving. Well, this man, Mr. Willis, died because of a lack of due process. Are the cops who shot him good cops? Well, he shot first. We don't know that. That's the assertion. That's the claim that he shot first. And it may or may not be true. It could also be true that, according to the report, He initially came to the door with his gun, which I don't blame him. You come to my house at 4:15 or 5:15 or whatever in the morning, or 5:17 in the morning. I don't know. You come to my house at 8 o'clock at night. I'm going to have a gun on my hip when I come to the door. Just this morning, I had a family member come to the house unannounced. I was sitting here in the studio, and my dog started barking. I heard a door slam. I heard. Now, chances are it's probably somebody I know. But you don't think that I'm going to be aware and alert in our environment today? Now, what if that had been somebody who had said, "Hey, we know this guy's channel. We don't like his content, and we think he might be dangerous." Now, you're saying to yourself that could never happen. Well, it can't. Are you sure? Because the American Conservative shared a story. Well, they didn't share the story, but they elaborated on it even more. James Bovard, on January 1st of 2021, continued to tell the story, and this story has remained unresolved. Tells a story about Duncan Lamp of Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland. This 21-year-old man was killed in a no-knock raid. And as far as I have been able to ascertain, he had no criminal record. Allegedly, he had a juvenile record that forbid him from having a firearm, and that an anonymous source complained that he had guns that he wasn't allowed to have. And of course, one of these guns that he's not allowed to have was allegedly an Israeli assault rifle, which turned out to not be an actual. It was a domestic mock-up of the Israeli assault rifle that was supposedly illegal and that he was supposedly not allowed to have, that his family adamantly disputes that assertion. They execute a no-knock raid at something like 4:15 in the morning. They come through his window, allegedly, and we say allegedly because we don't know, because guess what? Montgomery County, Maryland, the police union has said that SWAT teams have been able to manage to get negotiated that SWAT teams don't have to wear, especially when they're conducting no-knock raids, they don't have to wear body cameras or activate them if they do have them on. So Duncan Lamp was shot and killed for allegedly going for a firearm. As people come bursting into his house announcing that they're cops and everybody's supposed to just comply. Now, people would say, well, Cotton, I mean, who else is going to come bursting into your house for no reason? Well, so there's some speculation as to whether or not this was just a no-knock because this was a person not authorized to have a firearm, which, by the way, I don't think there should be any law about who can and cannot own a firearm, by the way. Period. I am a Second Amendment absolutist. Just because you've been charged with a crime doesn't mean you should have your firearm, your liberties removed from you. I think that's a violation of the Constitution. So there's some question as to whether or not this was a valid warrant in the first place, whether or not he was allowed to even have the firearms in his house. And then there's the no-knock aspect, which, by the way, good cops will not take part in a no-knock warrant, because time and time again, no-knock warrants have proven to be fatal to innocent civilians. Now you're saying, well, you're being ridiculous, TC. No, I'm not being ridiculous. Does the Bill of Rights exist? Yes or no? Then you have to ask yourself the question: if the Bill of Rights exists, does the First Amendment exist? And we know that it does, which allows us to hold unpopular opinions. And one of the things that they went after Duncan Lemp for was the fact that he's allegedly affiliated with extremist groups. Now, what have we seen happen so much since 2020, especially, but even from 2016 to 22, anybody who denies the left-wing Marxist progressive agenda is an extremist. I'm an extremist. That's what Sheriff Kevin Torgerson basically was saying in his attack on me in his subsequent attempt to try and fire me, which he lost. Yes, I don't work for the sheriff's office anymore, but he didn't have grounds to terminate me. So what did they do? They said, hey, look, what kind of agreement can we come to so that this works out so that we don't get our asses handed to us in the courts? But he accused me of being an extremist and tried to accuse me of violating the law, which he couldn't prove. Now, I wasn't interested in dragging it out in a court fight to go on indefinitely for years and years and years. But anybody who doesn't toe the approved line, who doesn't follow the narrative, is an extremist. Do you understand? You are an extremist if you do not capitulate to whatever their narrative is. And so Duncan Lemp allegedly was a violent extremist. He was allegedly a white nationalist. He was part of the evil 3%ers. He was a part of the evil Boogaloo Boys. He even tweeted, "Our Constitution is dead." I mean, how dare he? Someone reports him. No one knows who who reported him, by the way. Oh, and by the way, these are the tactics that they use on everybody. They've used it on a lot of the people that I have seen him. I don't know what happened there, ladies and gentlemen, but I lost feed for a minute. Shock of all shocks, right? Conspiracy theories and abound, right? So on and on and on. So we still don't know the full story of Duncan Lemp. We don't. We do not know the full story on what happened to Mr. Lemp. I have reached out to the guy who wrote the article that I was reading earlier about this James Bovard, and asked if he might be willing to come on sometime and talk about what he knows. Maybe he can help connect me. I'd like to do a little series about Duncan as well. But what do we know? Next to nothing. Why? No transparency. Okay? So here's the deal. Here's what a good cop is, and I don't care if you don't like this definition. A good cop is just not a guy or a gal who shows up to do their job, keeps their head down, doesn't rock the boat, doesn't abuse the civilian populace, doesn't beat anybody up, doesn't write unwarranted tickets. A good cop is a cop who stands on the Constitution above everything else. A good cop is a cop who will stand up and tell a sergeant or a lieutenant or a captain or a chief or a sheriff or whoever might be over them, whatever their superior might be, is like, no, I'm not taking part in this. I want to say it was Saint Croix, or well, it was somewhere up by the cities. There was a school district that wanted law enforcement to trespass anybody who wasn't going to wear a mask, and they wanted to trespass anybody who refused to not call out school board members and school district employees by name. Situation arose. School board chair asked the chief who was there, "Hey, I'm going to have you remove this guy and trespass him." And the chief said, "No, I will not trespass this person. What they're doing is constitutionally protected, and I and my officers will not take part." That's a good cop. And anybody who follows that cop is a good cop. But if you get ordered, like the Albert Lee PD school resource officer who wrote a trespass order on my friend Topher, okay, bad cop. And we know that that's a predominantly bad agency because it's run by a corrupt chief, J.D. Carlson. Happened in Rochester. Rochester police, school resource officers willing to trespass people for not wearing a mask during public comments. That's bad policing. I don't care if you're a member of the Rochester Police Department and you know me and we're friends. That's bad policing. Requiring people or following the order of the school district to trespass people and write them up formally for trespass when they refuse to wear a mask during a First Amendment protected activity is bad policing. And if you enforce that, you're a bad cop. It happened at the Dover Yoda School Board meeting this last fall. I was there. I have the video footage of it. Bad policing, bad cops. John Morozic, Sergeant Damons, Todd Peterson, bad cops, bad cops. And they set an example for a young cop, a new one, a new deputy, to be a bad cop because they were more interested in enforcing a policy than they were on standing on their oath and on their constitution. Good cops stand on their oaths. That's how you know what a good cop is. I was listening to Tom Woods in one of his most recent podcasts, and he was doing this thought experiment that he has heard from a particular philosopher and thinker, but he was going through this, and he says, do you hold an opinion that if you expressed said opinion to people around you today, you run the risk of ruining friendships, relationships, losing income, losing a career, or being made incredibly uncomfortable? If you hold that opinion, even though it's right, but you refuse to speak about it publicly, then you might as well not hold it. And I'm paraphrasing the longer podcast, obviously. So excuse me for just a second. I think I'm going to... I was going to sneeze. I'm glad I muted for that. If you hold an opinion and you're not willing to speak it, if you're not willing to take risk to stand on what you know to be true, if you're not willing to take that risk and speak out, then you're not a good cop. If you know that a law violates the Constitution, if you know that an order violates your oath and you follow that order, you are dirty. Do you understand me? You're dirty. I will know you're a good cop when you speak out, even if it means it costs you your career. That's a good cop. That's who I back. And I don't care if this costs me friendships. I'm friends with a lot of people in law enforcement still. People who don't talk to me anymore, so I'm not really sure that they're my friends. You know what they say. But this is how you know who a good cop is. This is how you know what a bad cop is. A bad cop's just not the guy who's beating up innocent people. A bad cop's not the guy who kicks a woman in the face when she's sitting on a curb and she's handcuffed. A bad cop's not a guy who shoots somebody and then plants a gun on him. A bad cop's not just somebody who murders somebody or in the line of duty, unjustified. A bad cop is a cop who doesn't stand on their oath. A bad cop is a cop who enforces unconstitutional edicts and unconstitutional laws, who enforces policies over standing on the Constitution. That's a bad cop. And I'm sorry, 75% of the people in law enforcement today fall into that category, whether they recognize it or not. And I don't care if this makes me unpopular. I don't care how many of you I lose. I don't care if my subscriber base falls all the way down to 5. Because constitutionalists and conservatives have to back the police. I got news for you. The police are the ones that are going to come for you. If they don't stand on the Constitution now, while they still have the relative protection to do it, who do you think is going to be the one that's going to come for you when they don't have that protection anymore? A good cop doesn't follow bad law. A good cop doesn't say, well, the courts have ruled that this could or could not be enforceable constitutionally, so I have to enforce it. No, a cop says, I know what the Constitution says, and that law, let's say a red flag law, or let's say no-knock warrant, and I say on no-knock warrants, no-knock warrants, because I don't care I don't care how many people it potentially saves. If one innocent person dies because of a no-knock warrant, bad law. And if you're willing to take part in it, bad cop. Uphold your oath. Stand on your oath. Keep your oath. Keep the promise to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States against enemies, both foreign and domestic, makes you a good cop. And if you aren't thinking about the Constitution every single day when you start your shift, get the hell out of law enforcement. Because you are dangerous and you will be easily corrupted. In every shift that I started for the almost 13 years that I was in that field, even as a detention deputy, just a stupid jail guard is all I was. Because I hear it all the time. Well, you weren't actually a cop. You were just a stupid guard. Fine. I was just a stupid guard. I still thought about my constitutional rights or my constitutional duties. And when I was told that every single person in the detention center was going to wear a facial covering when they were out of their cell, and if they refused, I was going to be expected to discipline them, even if by locking them down in their cell, which meant if they refused to go and I told them, I was going to have to use pepper spray on them if that's what was needed to get them in their cell to gain compliance. I said, I'm not doing this. So I didn't force the issue. Because I would not use pepper spray on someone because they wouldn't wear a facial covering inside of a detention center. Because even in a detention center, you do have some rights. You do have some liberties. Because you, for the most part, sitting there, need the protection of the Constitution more than almost anybody else. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you know what a good cop is. So I'm not going to go on and on and on about this. If you enforce things like red flag laws, if you take part in things like no-knock warrants, if you enforce any kind of law that or edict or executive order that you know violates not only the laws of the state, but the Constitution of the state that you live in, the Constitution of this United States Republic, you are not a good cop. And I will not say you're a good cop just because you're my friend. I want this to hurt. I want this to cut you. I don't care if it bothers you. It is what it is. Good cops stand on their oath. Good cops defend the Constitution. Good cops will not follow orders just because it's their job. That's the Nuremberg defense, and a lot of Nazis hanged for it. And I don't want that for you. Next episode, we're going to talk about how we ensure that good cops are good cops and how we keep them good cops and what you can do to make sure that this happens and the demands that you can make on your local city councils and your county commissions, your sheriff's office, your police departments, and all the other alphabet agencies that might be out there. Ladies and gentlemen, order coffee, order merchandise. Find me on Subscribestar, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment Podcast. And until next time, my friends, sic semper tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.